How's everybody doing? Good. It's good to see so many people here this evening. The speaker tonight, so I first met him probably four years ago, I guess. So I was, at the time, I guess, I was a house manager at the program that both of us went through. And it was right during the pandemic. And our speaker tonight, the one takeaway I took from Brandon was he was always right from the beginning. Right from the beginning when I first met him, he was always doing the right next thing. There was one of the counselors, and he's been a speaker here a long time ago, always asked us, does the integrity of the room change when you walk in it? You know, and that could be for the good or the bad. And our speaker, the integrity did change when he walked into the room. To be able to see what he has done. He had a goal to help other people, and he accomplished that, and now he is doing amazing things in the larger community, and I don't want to spoil any of that. I'll let him tell his own story, but let's give a round of applause for Brandon.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Good. So my name is Brendan Stiles. I appreciate Matt for having me here. My story started a long time ago for me. I was born in '89. So my childhood, I had a really good childhood, man. I had a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked, I didn't meet my real dad till I was 18, but my stepdad worked at Circuit City, if you're old enough to remember Circuit City. And all I can remember from my childhood is going fishing, playing football, going to school. Like, it was good for a long time, right? And then when I was about 9-10 years old, my stepdad had got promoted to district manager of Circuit City, right? So they gave him the opportunity to choose to either go to Hawaii and be district manager of Hawaii, or go to Chattanooga and be district manager there. And he chose Chattanooga. So he said that he didn't want to be on an island surrounded by water, right? So whenever I think back, I think I would have made a different decision personally, right? I think that my life may have unfolded a little bit differently if he would have, but those are the cards that fell. So what I can remember is almost as soon as we went down there, he ended up getting mixed up with a guy that he would, so since he was the district manager, he would get the TVs that came in and that people would return, and he would trade them to a dealer, right? Up until this point, I can remember being so sheltered, right, that me being a 11-year-old little boy, I would go and I'd be nosy, and I'd go in closets I probably shouldn't. And I remember finding a plant in my mom's closet, and I can remember this, I can remember thinking, well, plants need sun, they can't grow in the closet. What is she growing? You know what I mean? I can remember thinking that, like, doesn't she know this needs to be in the sun, right? So that just tells you where I was at that point, right? And then we were down there for a couple of years. I have a little brother that's 3 years younger than me, and a little sister that's 10 years younger than me, right? So when we were about, their life down there escalated pretty quickly. I didn't ever get to play football down there. I didn't play any sports. I played football my whole life up to that point, right? And then at that point, I can remember their best friend was this dealer. I can't remember his name. I think it was Dave, something like that. And so our life slowly went downhill. We ended up moving back to Knoxville, and we ended up living with my aunt, who was basically the trap house, right? So like it's the radio never turns off, and if you knock on the door, you're getting served, right? So it was that kind of a situation almost immediately. So I was about 12 or 13 years old. And then my mom and my stepdad. So up to that point, I thought that my stepdad was my only dad, was my real dad, right? Because I never met my real dad. And then I found out really quick when their relationship got rocky that I wasn't his son, because he would tell me. And whenever they got in a fight, if she got hit, I usually got hit, right? And when they fought, he would say things like, "You get your son and I'll get mine," right? So we went from that situation to back in Knoxville, living in a trap house, and they got on pills real bad, and he ended up going to prison for, when I was about 13, 14 years old, they robbed some guy and they ended up killing him for weed and pills.
Damn.
And they ended up sitting until the police came, watching the truck burn, high on pills, right? So, and then almost immediately after that, my mom went to federal prison. She went to prison for payroll fraud, because she would write checks for some guy, payroll checks, and then they would split the money, right? And then, but she was using her real ID, so you go to prison for that, right? So then I got left with my grandmother, and I got left in an environment where I had no more male role models. And the male role models that I did have were basically street guys and gang members, right? So one thing that I was drawn to in the beginning was these guys stuck together, right? Like there was a camaraderie there, and there was a group of guys that would get money together, and it seemed like at first like they would stick together, right? So I went from the only male role model that I had that would abuse me and my mom together, and to a group of guys that stuck together, right? And I was drawn to that. Up to but at this point, I was literally the only person that got any discipline, right? My little brother and my little sister have never been whooped in their life, never. So I went from that, and I transitioned into a whole different part of understanding how life worked. And you learn really quick that there's the have and there's the have-nots, right? And there's not any handouts, and if you're gonna have anything, you need to get to work. But the people that were there to model that for me didn't model a 9-to-5. They modeled selling dope, right? So I learned how to sell dope pretty early. Like I could eyeball something at 14 years old, right? So that kind of life kind of just kept going, and I didn't finish high school because my grandmother didn't care if we went, and that kind of life, the street life kept going. And I can remember being in an interrogation room 2 months after I turned 18, and then I had an alibi, and then 2 weeks later, the same detectives were on us for a whole different D&E, right? So that life just, it seemed normal to me, man. I never had a life that was like peace of mind up to that, like for a long time. So I ended up being turned on to the pill mills, right? So that kind of life kind of took off, and then the DEA stepped in and took all the pill mills away, and I learned really quick that I had a lifestyle that I couldn't manage and an addiction that I didn't know I had until they took everything away, right? So that kind of like snowballed into to my addiction. I can remember drinking and smoking at 15 years old, right? So it started there, and then it just, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain just continued most of my life. So I ended up having a son that I lost because I had a baby with someone that was from a different state. She went back to that state to have him, and then I was never on the birth certificate, and then we ended up splitting up, and she ended up getting caught with dope, and then going to jail and getting caught with dope in jail, and then gave my baby to someone else, and I never really had custody of my own son, and I don't get to see him today because I lied to that family when I was still in active addiction, and they still see me as that liar. So now he's 10 years old, and I've probably spent 1 year with him his whole life, if that. So my life continued. Well, you guys know what it's like if you've been on the streets, right? You chase, you consume, and you try to find money, and you try to get high, and you just consume and live, right? And so I've been through everything out there, man. I've been in shootouts. I've been stabbed. Real quick. So this is a real important part of my story, right? So for me, I was raised Baptist, right? And then when I was 26 years old, I was selling dope, and this girl was driving me around to make plays, and she ended up setting me up, and I ended up getting these two guys tried to set me up. They tried to rob me, and I ended up knocking one out, but not before he stabbed me 3 times, and then the other guy hit me in the head with brass knuckles, and then they got in the car and left, right? So I was stabbed in my leg 3 times, and at this point I was so lost that I remember asking God for a sign. I remember saying, I can remember like yesterday, I was sitting in my mom's living room, and I don't know if you guys have ever been stabbed, but when you get stabbed, that area gets really hard. It's really hard, it gets really stiff, right? So at that point I remember saying, God, if you're gonna take my leg from me, you can at least let me get hit by a car so I can get Opanas, right? And I remember saying that, like that was like yesterday, right? So 3 weeks later, on my 27th birthday, I got ran over at the strip club. So we got in a fight in the club, and then they ran me over in the parking lot, right? So I fractured my femur, tore my MCL, fractured 3 ribs, fractured my jaw, fractured my shoulder blade, and I got a concussion because they ran me completely over. I went underneath the driver tires, everything, right? I can remember I went to the hospital while everybody else went to go party, and then I can remember waking up at my mom's 3 days later, and I can remember something inside me saying, "You asked for this. You asked for this." And I remember that from it was saying it here, because I remember saying out loud, "I didn't ask for shit." Right? I can remember saying that. Like that's completely real for me. And then I sat there and I thought about it. I did ask for that. I won't ask for that again, right? But I can remember that, like that is a very real experience for me, right? So in the beginning, since I had been raised Baptist, I was 27 years old at this point. So I can remember, like at first, like it brought me closer to Christianity, right? And I would tell Christians that I believe in God more because this happened to me. And every single one of them told me that wasn't my God. That wasn't my God. My God wouldn't do that to you, right? So in that moment, I was thinking, I was like, well, this is very real for me. If it wasn't your God, then who was it? So it put me on this path to find other spiritual paths that related to me and the experience that I was having more, which ended up, so the way I define my higher power is an all-source energy that connects every human, plant, animal, rock, tree, everything's connected to one source energy, right? That is my higher power. And that's the higher power that has made me the man that I am today. Once I was able to understand that for myself and have that conscious contact with my higher power, my life changed, right? So that I was still lost, but that experience changed my life for the future, right? And then my little brother ended up being raided by the FBI in 2019. And my little cousin was killed. He ended up robbing a Detroit guy. He was 20 years old and he was murdered at 20, right? So he robbed him and he killed him for it. And then a week later, my little brother was raided by the FBI. And I was really lost in this moment. And my brother told me that all he wanted me to do was get all of his clothes and shoes and put them in storage for him, because he's gonna fight the case, right? Me being me, I went back to the houses that anything that the FBI didn't cut up or pull out of the wall or break, I tried to sell it, right? I spent a lot of time cutting cameras out of walls that you can't use because you don't have the modem, man. The FBI took the modem. I should have knew that. I spent hours doing that, okay? Like for days. I had like 30 cameras and they're like, you can't do nothing with this. So that was something. But what happened was I ended up getting one of the couches that weren't cut up, because they cut up every single couch. And I ended up trying to sell it on one of those sell apps. I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't Marketplace back then. It was something else I was using. And I ended up getting the money for that. And while I was selling it, I ended up getting an aggravated assault, right? So I ended up pleading guilty, and I ended up on enhanced probation. And this was when I tried using the MAP program, right? And I used it and it worked for me, but then I still had that addict behavior. So I used it to get off, to help me get clean like I was supposed to. But that addict behavior in me was still saying, well, you can make money off this now, right? So my behavior didn't change even though I stopped using. Let's see what happened then. So I ended up on enhanced probation, and then my PO told me that he didn't want me on MAT anymore. And my doctor told me that my PO said, I don't want you on it no more. And my doctor said, your PO can't tell me what to do. So I told him he can tell me what to do. So we need to start figuring this out. And my doctor wouldn't listen to me, so I just stopped going to him. And then a few months later was the anniversary of my little cousin's death date was coming up. And this is a kid that I watched from Pampers grow all the way up to the day he was murdered, right? So for me, even though I wasn't using, I didn't have any support. I didn't have anything to lean on. All I had was people that were still selling. So I naturally, since those were my friends, those were the people I tried to go see, right? And I ended up relapsing, and then I did that for a few months, and then I went and told my PO that I had been using, and he drug tested me and I passed it. So he had me right at the bottom of it that I felt that I've been using. They gave me a VOP, and that's when, so I left there, went and called a disturbing the peace. It was during COVID, so they ROR'd me, and then I ended up on DRC at Jelnick after I did about 70 days for those VOPs. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced it, but there's brief moments for me. I had moments where I didn't want to use, and I felt like I was using against my will. And then there were other moments where I felt, I'm so sick and tired of this. When they say you're sick and tired, but but I didn't have any resources. I didn't think I had any resources to help me get to that place where I could just stop using, right? So luckily I ended up at Jelnik in DRC, and I can remember I remember going into these programs knowing that I get to do these programs. Like, this is not a ball and chain. Like, this is a moment in my life where I get to actually use these resources to change my life. Up till then, I felt like I had to do these things. Once my perception changed, where I honestly felt and I knew that I get to go to these things. I get to go to meetings and stay clean. I get to go to probation and use these resources through the state, because up to that point, the state of Tennessee, the university, or the United States of America, and the police were all enemies to me. Like, they were my ops. Like, if I see you, I'm scared. I hadn't even done nothing. I'm not speeding. I got my license. I got a seatbelt on, and I get nervous. Okay, I still kind of like check my mirrors a couple times, right? But so what happened was, when my mindset changed, I was able to use these resources in a way that changed the entire quality of my life, man. I've been actively using something to seek pleasure or avoid pain for 17 years. A lot of that time I spent homeless. I spent days walking with nothing. I used to have to go to the KARM, to the mission, and hide my backpack in a tree because they won't let you carry your backpack in there. And I had to learn how to live with nothing for a long time, man. So, like, I know that it's possible that if you want to change, you put yourself around the right people and you use the resources and you make the right choices, and the quality of your life can change. It doesn't matter what anybody says or what anybody does. Like, I can remember my first day at DRC. I was sitting there and they had me introduce myself to everybody, and I was like, I'm so happy to be here. I'm at probation, by the way. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm ready to take this opportunity and change my life. And then there were guys in the back. I mean, we're all felons. A lot of these guys have spent years in prison, right? And the guys in the back were like, just wait till you get to phase 2. By the time you get to phase 2, you won't want to be here anymore. And I was like, dude, you can speak for yourself, but I'm not going nowhere, period. Like, I'm not going. And one thing that my counselor told me after I finished it was that the difference was the energy that I brought into the program, which is why those guys ended up going back to prison. And I ended up skating through with no failed drug test, completed everything the way I was supposed to, and continued growing in my life, right? So I always tell these programs, I always tell Jelnik and DRC that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be who I am. And they always remind me that I did the work, right? I had to make the choice that when guys were talking about going back and using or getting drunk all the weekends and going and doing all that, I didn't affiliate myself with those guys. When those guys were doing anything that I didn't see, if it didn't help me become the best version of myself, I don't want it. But I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But luckily, I've had really good men and really good women. But the surprising part is, I wouldn't be who I am today without really good women, man. There were some really strong women that popped up in certain places in my life that helped me, guide me, right? I am so grateful for that, man, because I don't have a really good reputation with women, right? But those really strong women have helped create and guide me through to become the man that I am today, man. So I completed all those programs. I've went on. I had my own apartment. I've got all the cars that I needed. I've grew into an individual that I measure myself on the amount that I give and not the amount that I receive, right? So service work is extremely important to me. I used to always hear in the rooms, you only have to change one thing, everything. And I used to think that is the craziest thing you can say to me, right? Because it doesn't make sense then, right? But it turns out that you do that one day at a time. And over a period of time, you stack up enough days that who you are as an individual has changed, right? All those cheesy little quotes they used to throw at me didn't make sense to me then, but they make perfect sense to me now. And if it wasn't for those predecessors laying the road before me, I still wouldn't be here, man. Somebody has done the work before me, and I'm hoping that as I go, I continue needing mentors to help change the quality of my life, right? And grow as a man to help others. So my life's mission is to be the best version of myself, so I can motivate, educate, and lead others to be the best version of themselves, right? That's all I want. I don't want anything else. Now, if they offer me a big truck, I'm going to take it. If God puts a big truck in my way, I'm going to drive it, okay? But it's not necessary for me to do the work that I do every day, man. It's not. I found that the work that you do spiritually is so much more gratifying than anything you can get that's tangible. It doesn't even touch it. It doesn't even touch it, the feeling that I get. So now I'm a CPRS and a recovery coach. So what that looks like is I'm a guide and a mentor for my peers as they develop their own quality of life, how they see it. I'm also a regional overdose prevention specialist through Metro Drug Coalition, which means that I do a lot of education on stimulants, opioids, harm reduction, and how that applies to our state. I started at Jonick and at DRC with a 10th grade education. I haven't kept a job in more than 3 months in years. I was in a failing marriage, a son that I lost, and now I go to Pellissippi for my associates in applied science for social work. I've grew as an individual, and I keep getting the chance to grow. Like my higher power continues to take care of me, man. And I don't see myself for the rest of my life. I don't see me not having that conscious contact with a higher power. Because for me, it's essential. Like I can't live without that, right? If anybody ever needs me, I'm always a phone call away. I can't give you money or a ride half the time, but I can talk to you, right? Thanks for letting me share.